control tower at Nellis Air Force Base fell silent at 6:47 hours. Not the usual pre-dawn quiet, but the kind of silence that spreads when something impossible happens. Major Derek Hitman Cross had his hand frozen over the coffee pot, eyes locked on the radar screen. The commercial Boeing 737 that had been cruising peacefully at 35,000 feet over the Nevada test range had just executed a maneuver that shouldn't exist in civilian aviation. A split-S reversal so clean, so precise, that it belonged in fighter combat, not a Tuesday morning commuter flight. "Tower, this is Talon 1, a voice crackled through the headset. "Did you just see that?" Lieutenant Ramirez, barely 24 and still learning which switches controlled what, nodded dumbly before remembering no one could see him. "Confirm visual, Talon 1, the 737 just. Cross grabbed the mic. "All aircraft, this is Nellis Tower. Maintain heading. Flight Aero West 412, identify pilot in command." Static. Then a voice came through, calm and measured, with the faint scratch of someone who'd spent years breathing recycled cockpit air. "Tower, this is Aero West 412. Captain Ellis Kine, pilot in command. Experienced some unexpected turbulence. All passengers secure. Requesting clearance to continue on flight plan." Something in that voice made Cross's jaw tight. He'd been flying fighters for 15 years, had logged combat hours in 3 different theaters, and he knew the sound of a pilot who'd done more than ferry passengers from Phoenix to Vegas. Ramirez was already pulling up the flight manifest on the secondary screen. "Sir," the kid said, voice dropping. "Captain Kine, Ellis Kine. There's a note in the system, former military, says here she flew." "Ghost Rider." The words left Cross's mouth before he could stop them. The radio chatter exploded. 3 F-22 Raptors on a routine training sortie had all heard it. Captain Viper Chen's voice cut through first. "Say again, Tower. Did you just say Ghost Rider?" Cross's hand was shaking now, coffee forgotten. He hadn't heard that call sign in 7 years. Not since the incident over the South China Sea that the Pentagon had buried so deep it might as well have never happened. Not since the pilot who'd saved an entire carrier strike group had been quietly shuffled into retirement with a chest full of medals no one was allowed to talk about. And now she was flying tourists to Las Vegas. The sky outside was turning from black to deep purple, the desert floor still invisible in the pre-dawn darkness. Somewhere up there, at 35,000 feet, a single mother with a 6-year-old daughter waiting at home was about to become the most talked-about pilot in the United States Air Force without even knowing it yet. Ellis Kine adjusted the autopilot and checked her watch. Another 40 minutes until landing. Her co-pilot, Marcus, a 22-year-old fresh out of flight school, was staring at her like she'd just sprouted wings. The turbulence excuse had been thin, but it was better than the truth. Better than admitting that muscle memory from another life had kicked in when she'd seen the radar signature of what looked like an unidentified aircraft entering their airspace. Better than explaining that her hands had moved before her brain caught up, executing evasive maneuvers she'd sworn she'd never need again. "Captain," Marcus finally managed, his voice cracking slightly. "What the hell was that?" Ellis kept her eyes forward, watching the horizon through the cockpit glass. The sky was her first love, before her daughter, before the uniform, before everything. It had been the sky when she was 8 years old, watching her father's crop duster loop through Oklahoma thunderheads. The sky when she was 19, accepting her commission at the Air Force Academy. The sky when she was 27, pulling 11 GS in a turn that physics said shouldn't work, with enemy missiles painting her aircraft and nowhere left to run except through. "Turbulence," she repeated, but her hand found the small scar on her left forearm, hidden beneath her captain's uniform. Shrapnel from an ejection seat that had deployed 3 seconds too late. She'd still made it home, always made it home. Marcus wasn't buying it. He'd seen the radar, seen how she'd moved, the way her whole body had shifted into something else for exactly 7 seconds. Captain Kine, I've been flying for 3 years and that wasn't. Drop it, Marcus. Her voice carried the kind of authority that ended conversations. She'd learned it from squadron commanders who'd led men into combat knowing half wouldn't return. She'd learned it from herself, in the mirror, the day she'd signed the discharge papers and promised her daughter that Mommy wouldn't be going away anymore. The radio crackled again. Aero West 412, Nellie's tower. We're going to need you to divert to Nellie's Air Force Base. Non-negotiable. Ellis closed her eyes for exactly 2 seconds. She'd known this was coming. The moment her hands had moved, the moment the aircraft had responded like it was a $73 million fighter instead of a commercial airliner loaded with 147 passengers who just wanted to see Cirque du Soleil, she'd known. Tower negative. I have passengers with connections. Request we continue to Las Vegas International. Captain Kine. Cross's voice was different now, quieter, almost gentle. Ghost Rider, please confirm your identity. The silence in the cockpit stretched out. Marcus had gone pale, finally understanding he was sitting next to someone whose story he didn't know. Outside, the first rays of sunlight were hitting the desert, turning the sand into liquid gold. Ellis had always loved this moment, the transition from night to day, the way the world remembered how to see again. Tower, she said finally, each word carefully measured. I don't use that call sign anymore. I'm just Ellis Kine. I'm just a pilot. Understood, Cross replied, but his tone said he understood nothing. Still need you to divert. We're scrambling an escort. 3 Raptors will be on your wing in 4 minutes. Ellis felt something crack inside her chest. 7 years. 7 years of school lunches and parent-teacher conferences and bedtime stories. 7 years of pretending her hands didn't itch for a control stick when she saw contrails at sunset. 7 years of being enough for her daughter, of being present, of being safe. All of it unraveling because she'd reacted on instinct to a radar ghost that probably wasn't even real. Acknowledged Tower, diverting to Nellie's. She started entering new coordinates, her movements mechanical. Passengers are going to have questions. We'll handle it, Cross said. Welcome home, Ghost Rider. But it wasn't home. Home was a 2-bedroom apartment in Henderson where her daughter Lily's drawings covered the refrigerator. Home was the smell of pancakes on Saturday mornings and the sound of her daughter's laugh when they played the "What Do You See in the Clouds" game. Home was ordinary, safe, and beautifully, perfectly boring. The F-22s appeared like angels of death, 3 dark shapes materializing out of the brightening sky. Ellis had flown with pilots like these, had been one of them. She knew what they were thinking as they took up formation around her lumbering Boeing. They were thinking about legends, about stories passed down through squadrons, about the pilot who'd done the impossible and then vanished. They weren't thinking about the woman who'd traded her flight suit for business casual, who'd chosen PTA meetings over briefing rooms, who'd decided that being there when her daughter woke up from nightmares was worth more than any medal. Aero West 412, this is Talon 1. Captain Chen's voice came through, and Ellis remembered that call sign. Viper. She'd trained with Chen's older brother back before the world got complicated. Pleasure to escort you in, Captain. We've got your 6. Appreciated, Talon 1. Ellis kept her voice neutral, professional. Inside, she was calculating how long this would take, calculating whether she'd make it back in time to pick Lily up from school, calculating how to explain to a 6-year-old why Mommy's face might be on the news. The desert below was fully visible now, a landscape of impossible beauty and deadly emptiness. Ellis had crashed here once, in a training exercise gone wrong, had walked 15 miles through heat that could kill a person in hours. She'd made it because quitting wasn't in her vocabulary, because somewhere back at base, her squadron was waiting, because the sky had taken her and she'd refused to let it keep her. But that was before Lily, before everything changed. Nellie's Air Force Base appeared on the horizon, a sprawling complex of runways and hangars that had been her world for 6 years. Ellis had sworn she'd never come back, had walked away from this place with her medals in a box and her uniform in a garment bag that stayed sealed in her closet. The memories here were too sharp, too complicated. They tasted like jet fuel and glory and loss that never quite healed. The landing was textbook perfect, because Ellis didn't know how to do it any other way. The passengers would remember this day, would tell their friends about the weird detour and the fighter jets, but they wouldn't know the truth. They wouldn't know that their pilot's hands had stopped shaking the moment she touched the controls, that for 7 seconds at 35,000 feet, she'd become someone else entirely. The tower directed her to a restricted area, far from the civilian terminals. As the engines wound down, Ellis saw the reception committee waiting, officers in dress uniforms, someone who looked suspiciously like a general, and standing slightly apart from the official delegation, a figure in a leather jacket that she recognized even from 200 yards away. "Christ," she whispered. Marcus followed her gaze. "Captain, who's that?" "Someone from a long time ago." Ellis was already running through protocols in her head. She'd need to deplane the passengers first, get them sorted with ground crew, make sure they were taken care of. Then she'd need to call her daughter's school, let them know she'd be late. Then, and only then, would she deal with whatever was waiting for her on the tarmac. But the past wasn't patient. It never was. The figure in the leather jacket was already walking toward the aircraft, and Ellis felt 7 years of carefully constructed normalcy start to crumble. Because that walk was unmistakable. That was Colonel James Ripper Walsh, her former squadron commander, the man who'd pinned her wings on her chest and later handed her the discharge papers with tears in his eyes. The man who'd promised he'd never ask her to come back. She stood up from the pilot's seat, her body moving with the fluid efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Marcus was asking questions, but his voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. Ellis was already somewhere else, already remembering the feel of a flight suit, the weight of a helmet, the taste of adrenaline before a sortie. "Stay with the aircraft," she told Marcus. "Help the passengers. Don't answer any questions about what happened up there." "But Captain..." "That's an order." The words came out harder than she intended. She softened her voice. "Please, Marcus, just trust me." The cabin door opened with a hiss of pressurization. Ellis stepped into the desert heat, and it hit her like a physical force. This air, this specific combination of dry heat and jet fuel and possibility. She'd forgotten how much she'd missed it, even as she'd tried to forget everything else. Walsh was closer now, his face weathered by age and combat and responsibility. He'd been her mentor, her advocate, the one who'd believed in her when the old guard said women couldn't handle the physical demands of fighter aviation. He'd been there the day she'd earned her call sign, the day she'd saved the carrier strike group, and the day she'd walked away from it all. "Ellis," he said, and his voice was exactly as she remembered. Gravel and command and something that might have been regret. "Sir," she couldn't quite keep the military bearing out of her posture, couldn't stop herself from standing just a little straighter. "I'm a civilian now. You don't have to." "I know what you are," Walsh interrupted, but not unkindly. "And I know what you were. That's why I'm here." Behind him, the official delegation was getting restless. A 2-star general she didn't recognize was checking his watch. Technical sergeants were already approaching the aircraft, probably to download flight data, to analyze exactly what she'd done up there. This was going to become a thing, Ellis realized. A whole complicated thing that would involve debriefings and questions and attention she'd spent 7 years avoiding. "I can't do this," she said, and was horrified to hear her voice crack slightly. "I have a daughter, I have a life. I'm not that person anymore." Walsh's expression softened. "I know about Lily, I know what you've built, and I'm not here to take that away from you." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "But something's happened, Ellis. Something that means we need Ghost Rider. Not the legend, not the story. We need you." The sun was climbing higher now, the desert heat starting to shimmer off the runway. Ellis thought about her daughter, probably eating breakfast right now at the kitchen table, probably chattering to the babysitter about her upcoming field trip to the Natural History Museum. Lily, who'd never known her mother as anything but Captain Kine, commercial pilot, provider of stability and normalcy and unconditional love. Lily, who had her mother's eyes and her grandmother's smile, and absolutely no idea what Ghost Rider meant. No, Ellis said. The word came out stronger than she felt. Whatever this is, the answer is no. Walsh nodded slowly, like he'd expected this response. Will you at least hear me out? 5 minutes. Then if you still want to walk away, I'll personally drive you home and make sure no one bothers you again. Ellis wanted to refuse, wanted to get back in the cockpit, wanted to demand they refuel her aircraft and let her complete her flight plan. But Walsh's eyes held something she recognized from her own mirror. Desperation. The kind that came from knowing people would die if you made the wrong choice. 5 minutes, she agreed, then I'm gone. They walked toward a hangar at the edge of the flight line, away from the official delegation and the growing crowd of curious personnel. Inside, the temperature dropped 20 degrees, the darkness a relief after the glaring sun. Walsh led her to a small briefing room, the kind she'd sat in hundreds of times before. The kind where careers were made and broken, where impossible missions were planned, where pilots learned which of their friends wouldn't be coming home. He pulled up a classified file on a secure tablet, the screen's glow illuminating his weathered face. 3 days ago, we intercepted communications about a potential threat. Details are above your clearance level, but the short version is this. Someone's planning something catastrophic, and they're using technology we don't fully understand. We need a pilot who can think outside doctrine, who can react faster than standard engagement protocols allow. You have hundreds of pilots who can do that, Ellis said, but her eyes were already scanning the limited information on the screen. Old habits. We need a pilot who's done the impossible before. Walsh tapped the tablet, bringing up a different file. Ellis felt her breath catch. It was the after-action report from the South China Sea incident, the one that had earned her a secret medal and a quiet retirement, the one that still showed up in her nightmares. That was 7 years ago, she said quietly. I'm not that pilot anymore. I'm slower, I'm rustier, and I have something to lose now. You're a mother, Walsh said. That's not a weakness, Ellis. That's why I'm here, because you understand what's at stake better than any pilot I have. You know what you're protecting now. Ellis closed her eyes, and for a moment she was back in the cockpit of an F-22, inverted at Mach 1.8, with her threat display lit up like a Christmas tree. She remembered the clarity of it, the way everything else fell away and there was only the mission, only the next decision, only the line between success and catastrophe. She remembered how alive she'd felt, even as she'd been terrified. But she also remembered coming home to an empty apartment, remembered the relationships that couldn't survive her deployments, remembered the day she'd realized she was becoming someone she didn't recognize. The day she decided that she wanted something different, someone small and perfect and entirely dependent on her to be better than she'd been. I can't, Ellis said, opening her eyes. I won't do that to Lily. She's already lost her father. I can't. Her voice caught. This was the part she never talked about. I can't make her lose me too. Walsh was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I met her once. Your daughter. 2 years ago at the commissary. You probably don't remember, but she was wearing a little jacket with wings on it. Told me she was going to be a pilot like her mom. Ellis felt tears prick her eyes and forced them back. That's exactly why I can't do this. Because I want to be there when she grows up. I want to see her become a pilot if that's what she chooses. I want to be ordinary and present and alive. I understand, Walsh said, and she believed he meant it. But Ellis, if we can't stop what's coming, there might not be a world where Lily gets to grow up and become anything. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implications that Ellis didn't want to examine. She thought about her daughter's laugh, the way Lily's hand fit in hers, the bedtime ritual they'd developed where they'd each share one good thing from their day. She thought about ordinary Tuesdays and school plays and growing old watching her daughter build a life. And she thought about the cockpit, the sky, the impossible maneuvers that were only impossible until someone proved they weren't. 5 minutes are up, Ellis said finally. I need to get home. Walsh nodded, but as she turned to leave, he said, Ghost Rider, if you change your mind, you know where to find me. The door's always open. Ellis paused in the doorway, silhouetted against the bright desert sun. For a heartbeat, she looked exactly like the poster on recruiting offices across the country, the legendary pilot who'd become a symbol of possibility. Then she stepped forward and became just Ellis Kine again, commercial pilot, mother, woman who'd chosen a different path. But as she walked back across the tarmac toward her aircraft, she couldn't shake the feeling that the path was about to choose her whether she liked it or not. The sky above was impossibly blue, the kind of perfect morning that made everything feel possible. Her hands, she noticed, had stopped shaking. They felt steady, capable, ready for whatever came next. Even if what came next was just getting home in time to make her daughter dinner. Even if the most dangerous thing she'd face today was explaining to Lily why Mommy's flight had been delayed. Even if Ghost Rider stayed buried where she'd left her, a memory and a story and nothing more. But the sky knew better. The sky always did. And as Ellis Kine climbed back into her commercial aircraft to finally complete her journey to Las Vegas, 3 F-22 Raptors circled overhead like guardian angels or harbingers, waiting to see which version of her would emerge when the world finally stopped pretending that legends could stay retired forever.